Today, we are on location in the city of Rome at the Foro Romano because I'm going to be doing a little astrocartography project here. I'm actually going to use the death of Julius Caesar, which is pretty much one of the few undisputed dates in ancient history, and actually use it to what we call rectify a chart or chart rectification. In this case, we know the date and the approximate time that Julius Caesar was killed famously by senators. But I actually used the technique of astrocartography to try and narrow down what might be the most likely time of his death. And then I actually compared it to the notes and publications of a few scholars at universities and found that I was probably exactly right. So, this project, I'm going to take you on the last walk of Julius Caesar, here from the Forum where he lived, next door to the house of the Vestals, the Vestal virgins who kept the eternal flame of Rome burning, and then the walk over to the Largo di Argentina and see the place where he was actually killed, which only recently opened to the public. So it's going to be sort of the last steps of Julius Caesar. And when we get there, I'll reveal to you what time of day that I believe through astrocartography and what some scholars also seem to just simultaneously agree with on what time. So I'll explain a little bit more about the technique. Let's go. I'm Kim Mott, and welcome to my astrocartography playlist. The Vestal Virgins had a really important role in Rome. They were quite revered, and that's why, Caesar would live next door to them. They kept the eternal flame of Rome burning, and they had to be designated a Vestal Virgin when they were a woman, young girl, teenage age, maybe younger. They would come from powerful and royal type bloodlines. They would come from noble families and be selected. They would train for 10 years and then serve for another 10 years and then train others for 10 years. So they had to be of service for a total of 30 years and remain a virgin and keep the flame going under penalty of death if they, didn't do either of those things. After that, they were actually allowed to get married, have kids even. So the concept of being born of a virgin is actually something quite different in the context of Vestal virgins. Anyhow, the Regia, or the home of Julius Caesar, is just adjacent to this area here where the Vestal virgins worked to keep the flame going. So from here is where we'll take that walk, the last walk of Julius Caesar. Of course, Julius Caesar would have been carried by servants in a litter and been reclining the whole way, but this would take me about the same time to walk. We'll get all the way to the Largo di Torre Argentina, which is part of the theater of Pompey. Pompey was one of Julius Caesar's allies. Julius Caesar's daughter even married him. They had been enemies, but became allies, and then Pompey died before Caesar. But the Senate was being renovated at the time of Julius Caesar's death, so they were meeting at one of those buildings instead, at the Theater di Pompeo. I'm going to continue this walk. I'll show you some highlights along the way, but I'm going to be walking for about 18 minutes to make it over there to the destination. Obviously, some things have changed a little bit as far as the roads and things like that. But it would have been busy just like this, maybe even busier, even though these are tourists and people would have been going to markets or going to specific buildings to do business. Some of the roads, like the one I'm on right now, are exactly the same. You can even see the marks of chariots and whatever kind of wheeled transportation they were taking. Super interesting. I'll try to stay out of people's faces as I do this, but there are a lot of people out on the street, so you may hear little conversations from around the world. There's where the eternal flame is currently kept in that white building, which we'll pass in a bit, right on the Piazza Venezia. It's one of my favorite parts of Rome. It's stunningly gorgeous. We'll pass through there in a minute. If you want to visit the Forum, be sure to book ahead, especially if you come in 2025, which is a Jubilee year. I booked the day that tickets opened for my date that I wanted to come. I'm in early April. And actually got one of the last few slots. So definitely a good idea to book ahead. These people waiting in line are actually people who already have tickets and just waiting for the entry point in time. As a bit of crowd control, they only let a certain number of people in at different times of day. Just down that way is the Colosseum. And here, we're going to cross the bridge. We'll get to the Piazza Venezia. It's quite beautiful. During this part of the Roman period, when Julius Caesar was killed, so around 44 BC, the time of day was actually split up, the hora or hours of each day. They were tracked by water clocks, sundials, different methods, the astrolabes, things like that. But they were actually, the common person would say, I'll meet you at the 5th hour or the 6th hour, because they would divide time up by 12 hours for how much sunlight there was. So I am, like I said, on the first day of April here in Rome, and the Ides, or the Ides of March, actually just meant the middle of the month, the 15th of March. The Calends would have been the first day, and the Nonis, the 7th or 8th day. But the 15th, a day meant for settling debts, would have been about the same amount of hourly division as today. And I'm actually walking at the same time of day that Julius Caesar, apparently according to historical records, left his house. So even the light would have looked the same as this. Don't know what the weather was like, but if it was beautiful like it is today, might have been a pleasant journey. Of course, Caesar had been warned, some academics think by an astrologer, others say a seer, that he should beware the Ides of March, and that it would have been a dangerous time for him, similar to how modern leaders today in 2025 have had similar warnings by astrologers, because there are just sometimes certain things that go on that you're at a heightened period of time that might be more dangerous than others. His wife had had a dream, according to legend, showing that he might have been killed that day, so he actually stayed home and made the Senate wait until he finally decided to leave. At the end of the 5th hour is what's written in history, which is right around this time of day that I have right now. Here we are. We made it to the Largo di Torre Argentino. It's also a cat sanctuary. Kind of interesting. We'll go down in there. You have to get a ticket and go down, but it took me about 15, definitely less than 20 minutes. I'll check the time now. But that was with crosswalks and pedestrian, stoplights and things like that, which if I were Julius Caesar being carried by servants through Rome, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have to wait. So couldn't have been any longer than that for his walk. And I think he would have arrived here at actually 11:11. Historians say that he left his home at just before the 5th hour. Remember, I was saying the hours were divided up by sunlight, over a 12-hour period. So that puts him at leaving the house maybe about 10:50, 10:55 a.m. in modern time. So according to the Astrocartography, I think he was killed around 11:15. Maybe the attack starts around 11:11. It keeps going for a while. There was a lot of people taking turns. And then maybe he dies right as that crosses over exactly where I'm standing. That Pluto descending crosses at 11:15 a.m. We'll go down in here and just look at the exact spot so you can see. But when I looked up what actual academics who have expertise in this area have done, and they've actually, collaborated and also gathered lots and lots of records together to corroborate the time of death. And they put it at about this exact same time. It doesn't have to be to the minute with astrocartography because, like I said, there's influence east to west of each line. But I'm pretty confident that it was just after 11 a.m. It was exactly on target there. You can see that Pluto descending line just looming and moving toward this exact area. On the geodetic map, what's geodetic equivalence is what we use for mundane astrology, looking at, a locality or a people group, something like that. You could also see that there was a Uranus line running right through Rome that day, which can mean, a sudden change, bringing sudden surprises to humanity as a whole. And it certainly brought a huge change to not only Rome itself, but all of human history. So on the astrocartography map, you can see the timing lining up with, violence from others because it's on the descendant. And on the geodetic map, a huge change happening in Rome. If you'd like to book a reading with me, you can also check out my website, kimmott.com. I do readings with private clients to check out your own astrocartography. I also do birth chart rectifications if you don't know your time, which is required for an astrocartography reading. But there's also lots of free resources on my website and here on YouTube with my astrocartography playlist. Okay, that's all I got for today. Hope you enjoyed this little excursion with astrocartography. Happy astro travels!